have a hard time looking for someone that can lead your sales team to drive more sales and grow your business? Well, chance might be it's not the sales team that has a problem, but it's the person who's owning and managing the company. Today, I'm sitting with Chris Atwell, who is a coach for manufacturer rep agency owners, and he shares the secrets of how he's working with these multi-generational companies that are out of shape, out of alignment, and out of vision, and learn how to retune and focus so that the owner can help the sales team drive more sales without being in the trenches of the business every day. The insightful questions that come out of this interview will leave you thinking, my goodness, there are so much leadership potential in you at this moment. So let's get into the episode. Let's start there. What is a misconception that they have when you're working with these manufacturer rep agency owners? Like their thoughts around sales as well as like leadership. What's the common mistakes or common errors that you get to see throughout as you're working with different partners? And
Yeah. There's two things that come to mind for me. The first one is that sales is 100% relationship building. So you've got these agencies where, they've been around for 40 years. It's generational business. So the dad handed it down to the son. Right.
Yeah.
And dad in the 80s was relationships all the time, golfing, dinners, lunches, association meetings. And that's how he drove sales. Okay. And that's been cascaded and passed down to the new generation of ownership and leadership within these businesses.
Yeah.
But what's happening is times have changed, right? There is a lot of technology and data collection and ways to sell beyond relationship building. It's still an important part, but it's not the only thing that you should be doing, right? So that to me is a misconception that a lot of these agencies need to navigate through. And the second one is that as the owner of a sales agency, that you have to be selling. So you've got these owners of these agencies that are, doing 15 to $50 million in top line revenue.
Right.
And the owner is out doing sales calls, meeting with
the owners are doing the sales calls.
Yeah. And they've got like accounts and it's like, okay, why? Why are they doing that? Well, it's because I drive the most revenue in the business.
Interesting.
Right. Which the misconception is that their team members aren't equipped to do that. And that they're not equipping them or letting go and allowing others to take over those accounts so that they can scale in a different way by leading and coaching their team into high performance. Right.
That's a really interesting perspective because again, my viewers are entrepreneurs that are just starting out. Like they may have a 9-to-5, starting their side hustles, but I think there's a lot of wisdom that I think I can draw from the principles that you're talking about here. But before we get into more of like what you do for these agency owners, I want to hear your story about like how you got to this point. And like when I met you first time in person, but you look very fit and I love your tattoos on your arm.
Yeah, thank you.
Can you share with us how you got to this place of doing coaching for manufacturers rep agency owners?
Yeah, perfect. So I grew up in a military family.
Oh,
okay. My father
thanks for your service.
My father was 35 years military. And then I joined the reserves when I was 18. My brother joined the reserves and we both served as Governor General's foot guards on Parliament Hill and stood guard at the Governor General's residence in our late teens and did rifle drill and military training. And then I studied business and culinary in school. Okay.
Business and culinary.
Yeah. So
that's interesting. Yeah. Was that with what's that program where you, where the military funds the education? Was it that one?
It actually wasn't part of the military. So I left the military, and went to, Georgian College in Barrie, actually.
Okay.
Yeah. So, my first career was kitchen manager in a restaurant.
Okay.
I worked at Montana's Cookhouse Saloon in the late
Nice,
90s.
nice.
And I worked at multiple locations actually. And I learned a lot about leading teams in high pressure environments and hiring and managing money and food costs and working long hours.
Right.
Right. I also learned how to party hard and stick out your days regardless.
Right.
And I actually managed Hooters downtown Toronto.
Okay.
At John and Adelaide for
Wow.
a number of years too. From there, I went back to business school and I started my music business. So I actually started rapping and producing rap music under the name Absent Minded.
Absent-minded. All right,
Yeah.
folks, you know where to find it.
Yeah, you know where to find it.
Is it still available
So I was
online?
like, oh yeah, it is. It's on Spotify. You can find it.
Nice. We're uncovering the truth here.
It's one of those albums that if I ever become a politician and then somebody goes and listens to it, they're going to be like, he said this, right? So I'll own up to it. It was a different time. It's over 20 years ago.
Yeah.
But my plan coming out of business school was to be a full-time music producer and run a record label. And the truth is that I did that, but I didn't do it full-time. I did it part-time for about 20 years. And that was because of my mindset of being a part-time entrepreneur. I always had to have a plan A in my head, a full-time career where I had a pension, an RSP, full-time salary, all those things. And that was bred in me from my family, my dad and my mom.
Yeah.
And I always told myself that I would jump into my own business, but I never had the courage to do it. So I grew my career in sales. I did inside sales for a logistics company called Purelator. I moved up into national accounts over a period of 4 or 5 years. And I was managing territories worth like $25 million.
Okay. So you were starting the music side of the things. And I mean, you look really young, Chris, but you're saying you did that for 20 years?
Yeah.
And then now from that point, you've transitioned to now doing this coaching business work.
That's right. Yeah. Okay. I mean, I'm 45 now.
Okay.
So I'm 45.
Yeah.
So I grew my sales career while I was building my music career on the side.
So it's like overlapping.
Yeah. Right, so I was working full time for these corporations.
Yeah.
And I worked for almost 20 years in corporate doing starting from the bottom in sales, working my way up into sales leadership.
Wow. Okay.
And I spent the last 8 years for a large Fortune 200 company managing and directing a sales team across Canada. Okay. Wow. And I learned a lot with this with these companies, all while building my music business on the side. And, my music, you brought up your grants earlier.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that's right.
I got really good at writing grants from the federal government so that I could take myself and the artists that I was working with across the world. And we would go and tour in Amsterdam, France, New York, LA. We would play. But make a long story short, what happened was, my music career really did very well. I started securing licensing deals, and one of my claims to fame in the music industry is that I have a song in a LeBron James Sprite commercial that played worldwide during the Super Bowl, NHL playoffs, you name it.
Right on.
NBA playoffs for about 4 years that went around. And that was very lucrative, right? But I still didn't step away from the part-time entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
And then COVID hit, and I'm a fit guy. I love my CrossFit.
Yeah.
I'm competing in CrossFit over COVID, but I was overexerting myself. And quite frankly, I wasn't taking care of myself like I should have. I was still drinking heavily. I was using drugs in my, late 30s, early 40s. And I ended up post-competition in the hospital with what's called rhabdomyolysis. Okay. So I overexerted myself to a point where my muscles were breaking down, and the enzymes, the creatinine, it's called, that secretes from your muscles, blocked my kidneys, and I almost had kidney failure.
Oh, wow.
And it's Mother's Day 2022, and I can't even stand, and I'm literally pissing black like Coca-Cola.
Oh.
And I'm in pain, and I'm going, what is wrong? So I end up in the hospital, and I was there for 5 days, connected to IVs. They put about 3 to 4, maybe 5 liters a day, depending on the day, to rinse out my system, and they were monitoring me constantly. And that was a very rude awakening for me, right? I had to miss work. I almost died. I was alone in the hospital because it was COVID, so you couldn't have visitors.
The families couldn't.
Right. My wife was worried sick. My kids were freaking, my daughter was freaking out. And I did a lot of thinking while I was there. Like,
By yourself.
Where am I going with my life?
Yeah.
Right. And I realized that I had a calling to coaching. I didn't know exactly in what capacity yet.
Yeah.
But when I got out of the hospital as an outpatient, they drew blood. I still had to go and draw blood almost every 2 days for a couple of weeks so that they were monitoring to check in and make sure that everything was stabilizing. And I knew that I had to make changes. So I started changing my habits and my routines. And part of that was developing a morning routine, doing more mindfulness work, started cold plunging, reduced my drinking, all of these things.
Yeah.
And I started posting that journey online.
Okay.
And it was the middle of COVID. Actually, it was 2021. And as I'm posting this journey, I'm like, hey, you know what? I'm going to coach people. And an old friend of mine who is now a really successful business coach, Rob Gilbert, he'd been building up a coaching business where he's coaching coaches.
Yeah.
So I reached out to him.
Yeah.
And he gave me a lot of these tools and ideas on how to grow my business. And at first, I was just doing habits coaching.
Habits coaching. Okay.
Okay. And I had people in all kinds of walks of life. But then one day, somebody calls me. And it's an old colleague, a manufacturer's rep agency owner.
Okay.
Who used to be a sales rep for the agency, but he bought the business from his father-in-law. And he says, Chris, I'm struggling. I need your help. And a light bulb just went off in my head. I was like, whoa. It's like download from God. Like, dude, this is who you're supposed to serve. Because I get their business. I understand them. I've been working alongside them for 10 years.
Right.
So then I just said, holy smokes, this is it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I went all in on rep agency owners and
like coaching for them.
Coaching them. And instead of doing habits coaching,
it
just all started to click. I'm like, man, I can coach them on so many different things. And I developed the program. And that happened in about like 22 or 23.
Yeah.
And I was still working for corporate. Okay. So that mindset of part-time entrepreneur was still very strong.
Okay. I wanna park the car there for just a moment because I see two elements I wanna draw out from you. One is the corporate side, but the other one is the coaching side. Because when you mentioned you've been to the military, which I also been part of the reserves during my undergrad,
right on,
Navy's, and I realized there's a heart that you start to grow as you learn leadership, and just by hearing your story, I can see that there must have been an essence that has been kept on growing inside of you of learning to look at something or be like calling the best out of people or learn to be like, no, I can help this person out. Where do you think that's the case? Like, or was there another story from your maybe family line or someone in your family that's always been a teacher or like a coach?
Yeah.
I want to highlight that coaching side. Like, where did that come from?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there's a few inspirations in my life when it comes to the coaching side.
Yeah,
I've had a few amazing sales leaders of my own that I worked under. One of them was Mike Atwell, not the same last name. He's got 2 T's in his last name.
Okay,
but he took me under his wing in my late 20s, and he taught me so much about sales leadership in a short amount of time that I didn't realize until maybe 10 years later when it really sunk in.
Yeah.
So Mike was a real big impact on me wanting to help others because he helped me in such a great way develop my sales skills, grow my career.
Yeah.
And then another was his name is Patrice de Rochette. So I speak French,
Right.
and I worked in Montreal for a number of years. He was an incredible coach because he really taught me about empowerment and how to empower your team members to take initiative and proactively solve problems and drive results, which stuck with me. And I wanted to cascade that stuff down. So those two are like really, really critical to how I really started thinking about coaching. And then there was another gentleman, his name is Randy Winter. He ran a business, a plumbing manufacturer here in Barrie. He hired me on to develop a whole new division of the business that had never been done before. Trusted me. I crushed it.
Yeah.
And, that really opened my eyes to my entrepreneurial capabilities on that business side. That's
because usually when people say either they are so frustrated with what's going on in the industry and then they take it for themselves, but it seems like your story is like you were really receptive to being coached. You were coachable, and because of that, they saw your potential, they drew it up, and you're like, yeah, you're crushing it, as you say. And so I think that's pretty cool to hear that side of the story, because majority of my stories that I'm hearing, it's like I was so frustrated with the industry, like how people are doing sales. I'm gonna make it better, and so but that is the case, right?
Yeah, well, what I saw was it wasn't a frustration. It was an opportunity to help,
and it was empowering,
right?
Yeah, that's really cool.
So as I started coaching people, I started to really develop and fine tune what I was coaching on, because I really learned to understand what their challenges are. I already knew them, but the more I worked with people one on one, the more I really dialed in on it. And when you see the behavioral changes and you see people's like shoulders, you can see the weight be lifted off them and results and impact starting to occur. That to me is like, wow, right?
Fulfillment.
It's fulfilling, right? And I've got clients that return every 6 months over and over and over. I've got some clients that have been working with me for 2 years, right?
Yeah.
And that's really cool. And so those guys really helped me see how helping others can have an impact, because I felt it myself.
It's like a heart-to-heart connection.
Yeah. And then when I managed my own or directed a sales team across Canada, that was a real challenging role, right? Learning how to uphold standards, hiring and firing. In many cases, the company I worked for, I was there for 8 years. We went through 4 different leaders like above me, and I reported right to the top.
I was gonna say, I'm like, when you're actually going into these roles, I would imagine like the leadership that they had was just like my way or the highway sort of style.
Yeah, that would happen. What I learned was that I could demonstrate that what I was doing was working, and the systems that I had developed were having an impact, and they were driving results. So they would, I could influence.
Yeah.
That was great.
Can we go into that a little bit? So then let's say you're you find an agency owner, rep agency owner contacts you, says, Chris, I need some help. Like my business is a dumpster fire right now.
Yeah.
What are some of the first couple of things that you diagnose when you meet with them?
Yeah. So it's funny because a lot of the times the leaders of this companies, they say, hey, I want you to coach my salespeople.
Oh, so they say, can you coach the salespeople?
Yeah. That's how it usually starts, right? So they're always like, they're pointing the finger at the salesperson, saying, they're not pulling their weight.
Yeah.
They're not using the CRM. They're not. And then so the first thing that I'll start diagnosing is their leadership style. Yeah. I'll be like, okay, so tell me about, your day to day, and how is it you're approaching the challenges when the team member comes to you, right? And then
what's usually the response? I guess this is common, right?
They come to me with this challenge, and then I tell them how to fix it, right? Or sometimes I just step in and I handle it myself, right?
Yeah.
So what I diagnose is their behaviors and their leadership style. And then I'll often ask them, what's their vision for the business? right? Where are you today? Where are
Right.
the bottlenecks? Perfect world. Where do you want to be a year from now?
Yeah.
And as they start sharing those ideas with me,
Mm-hmm.
then I can start asking more pointed questions around where their behaviors come from and how,
Oh,
what their desire for change would be.
you're going right to the root.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then oftentimes, 9 times out of 10, the owner becomes my client rather than his sales team.
That is
Right.
so interesting.
Yeah. Because they realize, I help them realize
Mm.
that it all starts with them.
Mm.
They're running a business. They need to show up in a way that's going to empower their team so that their team are doing the things that they want. They need to uphold the standards. They need to work on themselves.
Yeah.
Right.
I wonder, how do you ask, or how do you say the right things to get the person to realize,
Mm.
like, oh, I need to change?
Mm.
Like, because in my experience, and again, I'm starting out right now, so I have limited experience.
Mm-hmm.
But it's more of like, and again, I come from a background of teaching, so I've been close to a decade teaching computer science, math, and music as well.
Right.
But it's more of like, no, you got to do it this way. And sometimes I ask questions to help them think. But how do you do it so that the owners would be like, my gosh, I need some help?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. What it boils down to is their vision. You have to tie it to their vision.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
So if you can get them to be clear on the vision and then have them articulate, it's funny, one of the questions I ask the owners is, well, talk to me about how much time you're spending on the road with your team members and in front of clients.
That's a good question.
And, what often occurs is they'll say, oh, way too much time.
Oh,
Oh, why is that?
yeah.
And you get to draw in, you pull the frustrations, really.
Mm.
When you want to connect with somebody, you have to help them really feel like you understand them.
Mm.
So by connecting the dots, by drawing the frustrations, by drawing the emotion out
Yeah.
and connecting it to the vision,
Mm.
then you can open the door to offering a solution.
Right.
Right.
Oh.
And I've had sometimes they see it,
Yeah.
but then they think they can fix it themselves.
It's like, oh, thanks for letting me. Yeah.
Right.
You've opened my blind spot now.
But they end up still spinning their wheels. Right.
In
But-
our sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, of
The
course.
visions, is it mostly, you find, is it by like their business vision, like wanting to make a lot of money?
Mm.
Or sometimes new trends that I'm seeing is like, it's all for the family, or maybe something that they love that they just want to support. I think it's like the two, or maybe what do you see in terms of their visions?
Yeah.
Is it?
I always look at a couple of things. I look at their vision when it comes to revenue and profitability
Gotcha.
of the business.
Yeah.
I look at their vision when it comes to the systems and processes that they want to develop in their business.
Mm.
I ask questions around their vision for talent and future leadership in the company.
That's a very important
So
question. Yeah.
those are very business focused.
Right.
But then we dive into the personal, right?
Mm.
Where we dive into personal wealth questions,
That's
right?
Yeah.
Or what's their vision when it comes to their personal wealth? Do they want to own a cottage up in Muskoka or, a villa in Nice, France, right? And they can take their family there more often, spend more time with their family. I often ask about hobbies and pastimes,
That's a new one.
right?
I don't hear many coaches talk about, what do you like to do?
Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
Huh.
I had a client. He just wanted to have more time to rebuild the 1982 Ford Mustang that had been taken apart and sitting in his garage for the last 4 years that he had bought as a gift for his wife.
Huh.
But he loved doing the work.
Mm.
He just couldn't find the time to do it.
Why do you ask that question? Why do you ask the question of like, what's your hobby? And then
Mm-hmm.
there must be an end result that you know it works.
Because most of the time they want to spend more time doing the hobby, but they feel they don't have the time to do it.
Mm.
So by getting to that,
Yeah.
you can help them understand that there's a way out.
Yeah.
Right. That
Do you see them get more excited because now the hobby once they do it. I think some people call it like soul filling activities.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially I work with a lot of Americans and my clients, they all love hunting and fishing,
Oh,
right? A lot of them.
something I
So
love to do.
when
Yeah.
they're outdoors, their soul is they're super open and joyful, right?
Hmm.
So yeah, and then the last question I usually ask is around their personal development.
That's an interesting one
What
too.
does
Yeah.
that future version of you look like
Hmm.
in your leadership, for your family, for your business, for
Yeah.
your community,
Hmm.
right?
I'm now curious now when they have even just within what is it like 10 minutes of these questions. I think that even the listeners will be like, "Oh my goodness, like these are solid questions I can think about,"
Mm-hmm.
because it really puts a north star of like fixing up whatever's inside of you. And then if you have a team, like you're trying to align the team to go to that direction together.
Mm-hmm.
And so many of the owners say to you at the initial, like, okay, coach my sales team. But then once you have this engagement, they're like, no, I need some help, Chris.
Yeah.
Well, what happens after then? Yeah.
Yeah. So generally, we sit down and we take a look at some really deep internal stuff.
Hmm.
That's where the mindset coaching piece comes in.
Okay. Yeah.
We look at the deep internal stuff that they haven't really reflected on, right?
Hmm.
So all these companies
Yeah.
and every company you've probably worked for or even schools, right?
Right.
They all have values, core values,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
So one of the first exercises I do with each one of my clients is I help them uncover their personal core values,
Hmm.
which nobody's ever really sat down and done. When's the last time
Yeah.
you looked at your
Yeah.
own personal core values, right?
Last time I've done it was at the summit. It's like,
Yeah.
yeah, until you're in that space.
Yeah.
But you're right. Nobody asks, like, so what's your core? I don't know.
Yeah. So what I've got is a series of questions that help draw them out, right?
Mm.
And those core values serve as, you use the term North Star, the lighthouse of their decision making.
Mm.
So, my core values are integrity, servant leadership, and discipline.
Mm.
Okay. So when I'm navigating through my day and making decisions, and I coach my clients on this, is look, does the decision align with your values?
Mm.
Are you being a servant leader? Are you making the decision in integrity? Are you disciplined in your approach?
Right.
Now, for me, that's how I navigate. So I help them wrap their head around how they can make better decisions in their
Mm.
day to day
Mm.
that align with that. Then we look at their own personal mission and vision.
So core values, and then
Yeah.
go on to mission and values.
And vision.
Mission, vision, and values.
Yeah.
Okay, there
Yeah.
you go.
Right. Which everyone needs a mission and vision. You need one for your business, but you need one for yourself too as a business leader.
Hmm.
Right. What is your mission and where are you heading?
Yeah.
Right. And then from there, we'll take a look at things like limiting beliefs exercises,
Mm-hmm.
what's holding you back. We'll look at what I call peak performance habits.
Yeah.
So what do your current routines look like? Right.
Mm-hmm.
I'll have them document everything too. Right. And when these are also really good trust building exercises, because most of the time they don't really know me at first. Right.
Yeah.
So as we go through these exercises, by the time a month comes around, I know a lot about them and they're
Mhm.
feeling more comfortable opening up
Yeah,
when we
yeah.
get into the deeper work, right?
Right.
About their business.
Yeah.
So we dig into what does their morning routine look like? What is their
Mm.
evening routine? How much time are they spending on their phone?
Mm.
How do they eat, work out, sleep, all the things?
Yeah, yeah.
What do they want it to look? And then what habits do they want to eliminate? I'm celebrating 2 years alcohol free now, right? And I leverage that because I feel amazing and clear, right?
Yeah. Mm.
I was a heavy drinker, and the people in this industry, in the manufacturer's rep agency business, they're constantly at events where alcohol is flowing.
Mm.
Okay. And more times than not, people wake up with headaches and
Yeah.
dry mouth and
Yeah.
hungover.
Yeah.
So I'm encouraging people also to live healthier lifestyles, right?
Mm.
So by looking and evaluating their existing habits, they can write down what habits they want to create for themselves, and then I hold them accountable to it, right?
Mm.
And then that sets the stage
Yeah.
for the next part of our coaching journey, where then we really dig into their business.
And that includes the sales component.
Yeah, of course. Because what happens is, oftentimes they look at their sales processes, how effective they are,
Yeah.
and then I coach them through how to improve them, right? And I don't just come in and rewrite it for them. They rewrite it for themselves.
Right.
That's my approach.
When you say all these things, you're right. I hear Chris Atwell is a servant leader. Like not just a servant, but you're a servant leader. And I think that's a rare character to see nowadays. I mean, the young folks probably would see these like what do they say, like alpha male leaders, like you gotta do this, do that, and like yelling at you. But this is coming at an angle that's I would use gentle but firm, but still leading the people to their potential. So
Yeah.
how so if somebody starts usually to get to the end of this first phase of coaching, is that like a 1 month process, 2 month, or how does
Yeah.
that usually look like in terms of timeline?
So I work on 6-month increments.
Okay, 6 months, yeah.
I'll do 1 hour weekly with a client
Mm-hmm.
for 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. One-on-one intensive, 50 to 60 minutes a week.
Yeah.
And they're deep working sessions where we can get in the weeds, or we can work through a lot of these modules that I've created.
Yeah.
And after 6 months is when you start to feel the real impact.
Mm-hmm.
There's always work to do, right? So it's like I said, some clients have been with me a couple of years.
I wanna also ask a question, because I know some of the listeners too. It's like, in your case, who have been the least successful, and what do you think they're stuck on? Because I know you're a great coach, but there's sometimes you can lead the horse to the waters, but the horse has to drink it, right?
Yeah, the least successful have been the clients that I've taken because an owner of an agency wanted me to coach one of his team members.
Gotcha.
And then that team member wasn't really receptive to it. It's not, that team member's not the one who reached out to me.
Gotcha.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've got a client who I've been working with for some time. Amazing guy. Loves his business. He's passionate. It's multi-generational. He wants nothing but the best for his business. And he's struggling to develop the future leaders in his business. So his hope was that I could help turn around one of his top sales guys and help them become a future leader. But that person that he was talking about had consistently let him down. There was a number of frustrations, etc. And my gut feeling was to tell him, you know what, I don't feel comfortable coaching this guy.
Right.
In fact, I think you should let him go.
Oh, even though he's a top sales guy.
Well, he was his perceived top sales guy. He wasn't collecting enough data to know for sure. Okay,
that's always the case too,
right?
Yeah, collecting data.
So there's perception versus reality,
right?
And that's one of the things I coach people in is like, how do you know the ROI of your team members, right? So there's some shocking outcomes, right?
I measure it this way, and they're like, no.
Yeah, right. But looking back, I really wanted to please my client, and I took it on as a challenge, even though my gut was saying otherwise. And that's a really valuable lesson learned for me moving forward. I won't do that anymore.
Yeah.
But that guy who that he wanted me to turn around, I took the same approach as I did with my client. And these sessions turned into he was just complaining about his boss.
Oh man. Yeah.
He was, he came to me and he said, I got a job opportunity with another agency. I want to know how to approach it.
Like, I'm not here to coach.
And I was like, well, look, I says, you're here to become a leader in this business.
Yeah.
I'll help you get there. But if this is really something that you're bringing up, you need to communicate this to your boss, not to me. And
please.
Yeah. So make a long story short, the way that this guy approached that conversation with his boss ended up getting him fired. Okay. So your question was, how come sometimes, sometimes you see that it's not successful, and it's because I worked with somebody who didn't really want it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and that's, you got to want it. You got to want to change.
Yeah.
And oftentimes organizations come to me and they say, we want to coach my whole management staff. And it sounds nice.
Yeah.
Right. And I'll get paid for it.
Yeah. The money's probably good too. Yeah.
Right. And at first I was accepting those opportunities, but 50% of the people on that team, they don't want to change. They don't even show up for the coaching call in some cases.
Right.
So it's like, yeah, those are the people who are successful. So
I also want to lean into the other side now, because there are some listeners that like, they know it's like I think I have a sense of leadership, but they need that encouragement. And you've probably been in situations where owners are like that have worked with you for some time, and they're now saying, hey, I really see this guy and this person wants to, rather than like the person that didn't want to. What kind of encouragements would you sort of start off with those people that have the capacity, they're doing quite well in their business, they're being praised amongst their staff and their management? Because for some, it might be really scary. It's like being a leader. It's like, I never saw myself as a leader. Yeah. What do you have a process for that? Or,
I always refer people to one of my favorite books by John Maxwell called The 5 Levels of Leadership.
5 Levels of Leadership.
Yeah. Because everyone at some point or another gets picked to champion something, to be a leader in something, right?
Say that again.
Yeah.
Say that.
Everyone in their life at some point or another gets picked to champion something, to be the leader for something, right? And maybe that's, you're gonna be the one who's organizing your buddy's bachelor party.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Or, you know what? The kitchen manager is sick at the restaurant, so this line cook has to be the one to act as the kitchen manager today, right? So it happens in every business. It happens in everyone's life, right? And what the 5 levels of leadership talks about is that there's a process that you go through in your leadership, and the first level is you are simply have the title.
Yeah.
You've been given the title of manager. But nobody trusts you. They've never worked with you. Who is this guy? Right? So you don't have any clout. You don't have any
that's a good word, clout.
Right? But you are the manager.
Yeah.
Okay. So you need to work yourself up the levels. Level 2 is when you've done something for your team members and they recognize you as the manager now. They acknowledge you as the manager.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if you are thinking about, people think that I'm a potential manager, know that everyone was a level 1 at some point. All right. We can give you the title,
that's good,
but it doesn't mean that you're actually a leader yet.
That is so good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Level 3 is when the company recognizes the impact of your leadership. Okay. So the team members now acknowledge you as a leader. Level 3, the company's like, yeah, he's doing a good job.
Right.
Level 4 is when you actually start to develop leaders. And that to me is one of the most important aspects of leadership that so many people haven't wrapped their head around. And it's that, look, if you're a leader in your business, one of the key things you should be doing is developing your people. And you should be looking for that future talent that you can feed up the pipeline to be future leaders of the business, right? So that you don't have to wear all the hats all the time.
Yeah.
Right? But level 5, which is the pinnacle, is that you are now developing leaders who are developing leaders. Right? So I went all the way up the levels. But that first level, know that if people are praising you and people are saying, hey, I see leadership potential in you, and you're doubting yourself, know that everyone was a level 1 at some point.
Yeah.
And
that's so good.
And even even if you were the CEO of a business, okay, and you left and you started at a new company, you're back to level 1. You're just going to move up the levels faster, right? But you're at level 1. I remember I told you I was working for the last corporate company I was working for. We had 4 different leaders in 8 years, okay? Everyone that showed up on the doorstep, we would have like a round table and we get to meet them. And every time it was like scrutiny, like, who is this guy? Is he really going to make a difference? Right? He had to literally get past level 1 and get to level 2 so that we acknowledged them, him or her, because we had a woman leader at one point. She was amazing, but recognize them as our leader, right?
That's so good. And there's so many different. I got to bring you back on because there's so many variations I can go off of this. I guess I want to pivot to, and we'll sort of land on this point here. So as business owners, when you say top talent, it's like music to my ears.
Yeah.
And in my journey amongst my circle of friends, they're complaining, where do you find these top talents, right? And they look on Fiverr or they look on different places. They try social media, but they think it's social media. They don't have a personal brand like how we're trying to build it ourselves. And so they think the platform is just for kids dancing around and making some money here and there. But in your experience and where you see the trend going, as a business owner who wants to hire top talent so that they can train leaders afterwards too, what do you think they should be looking toward, and if it's internal or even external? Yeah, if you can speak on that as we land here.
Yeah. You brought up a term earlier in the conversation that really, really resonates in this moment, and that's coachable. You can find people that have all the experience in the world, okay? On a resume, it's like, wow, this is exactly who I'm looking for. But then when they show up and they start doing the work, they want to do it their way or the highway, right? Not coachable. Every business is unique. Every business has different level of complexity, requirements, standards, culture, all these things. So finding people who are coachable is really important. And you were asking me earlier today about my team in particular, how many team members I have. That is one of the most important traits for each one of the people on my team, is that they're coachable. They're willing to learn. They're willing to demonstrate that they're learning, and they're willing to hold themselves accountable to a standard that I'm upholding. All right.
Could you give us a small example of what that looks like?
Yeah. So I've got a team member who I actually hired as an intern almost 2 years ago. And I hired him as an intern, and I was feeling out his abilities to do market research and so forth. So I gave him a task when he was an intern. I said, I want you to evaluate what industry courses look like online and whether or not this is a viable direction for my business.
Right.
And he had no experience doing that. But he came out the other end with like really valuable insights.
Is this before ChatGPT?
This is before ChatGPT. Okay.
Wow. So that shows, yeah.
Yeah, it was probably around the inception, right?
Right.
But he wasn't using it.
Right.
Okay. What he was doing was, well, I'm gonna sign up for these courses. I'm gonna take them all.
Wow.
And then I'm gonna evaluate them. That's how he approached it, right? Which I thought was like, wow, right? So what that told me was that, okay, this guy's willing to get into the nitty gritty. He's coachable because he's willing to learn something. And the skill sets, he was from the real estate. Like
interesting. Wow.
He's a young man, has a family,
but
wanted to get out of real estate marketing and do something else. So he joined this internship program. So anyway, his coachability is what really drew him to me. And I've now hired him in a certain capacity. And what we've done is we've set clear goals for the year. Okay. He works on the marketing side. So I've said, all right, look, we need to grow my social media presence by this percentage. My email marketing campaigns have to have such an open rate, click-through rate.
Yeah.
We're looking at a percentage of my total revenue being driven by marketing activities and how we can capture that. We're looking at all kinds of different metrics. And what he did is he put together a spreadsheet and he's tracking it on a monthly basis. And he's proactively coming to me and sharing the results, saying, look, we're crushing it here. Here's where, excuse me.
Yeah.
Here's where we're a little behind.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to write a game plan, he said, and I'll bring it to you next week of how we're going to course correct.
And when you talk about like the Google Sheets, like you didn't give him the template. He went about.
Well, we
you give him guideline.
I gave him some. I asked him enough questions
just a hint, yeah,
for him to be able to put it together. Okay.
Oh,
yeah.
Right.
He's coachable.
Right.
He's coachable, and we just had a discussion last week, or it was this week actually, where he's like, oh man, like I did some deep dives in some of this stuff, and he was sharing what his insights were and what he's learned from it and what he's going to carry forward. Right. So coachability is probably one of the most valuable things. I mean, you and I were at the Social Selling Summit with Dan Martell, and Dan Martell is all about upholding standards. Right. And he does a community group call on a weekly basis. And he's very clear of what the expectations are on these calls. And there was somebody recently, okay, who was not coachable and was breaching those expectations.
Right.
And what Dan did was crazy. Okay. I thought it was crazy, but amazing at the same time.
Yeah.
He said to his assistant, he said, this person here, refund him right away and take him off the program. And he said, so-and-so, you know what? You're not meeting the expectations. You're not coachable. If you don't want to be here, you can have your money back and take care. Kick rocks.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, that's what I'm talking about, right?
That's right. Upholding standards, right?
So what happens with entrepreneurs is they hire people, they get frustrated because they're not coachable. But you also need to remember this. If someone is coachable, that means they need a coach. So you as the business owner need to be the coach.
Not just the owner.
Exactly. So look for someone who's coachable, but recognize that you have a responsibility and a role to play of being that coach. Not just throwing people in the fire.
Yeah.
Right? That's what leadership is about.
That's fantastic. You know, we'll have to end on this question. Why are some business owners reluctant to get coached? Because I think as a coach, you can see, and your experience talks of it. And I, as a coach, I want to help more people, but sometimes they just got blinders on, and but other times it's different things. It's like the ego is like, I don't need a coach. I'm doing my business pretty well.
Yeah.
Like I
think it's ego, right? Your ego can sometimes be that's your identity, right? Your identity is that I'm a problem solver. I figure things out on my own. You know, I got this. So quite simply, they might not be coachable or don't want to coach because they just truly believe that they can figure it out themselves.
And you'll have to let them be on their own, even though you see the good potentials.
Yeah.
Amazing. Chris, thank you so much. Where can people find you? Is there anything exciting that you're doing that you'd like to share so that they know where you're going?
Yeah. You can find me anywhere at the Chris Atwell. Okay. And what am I doing? Exciting. I'm developing a group coaching program soon that we'll be launching where it's going to be more community based rather than just one-on-one. So if you're an entrepreneur, you can explore that. I'm also writing a book right now, which is a business book about my life and the frameworks that I teach, which I'm really excited to launch in the new year.
In the new year.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll maybe bring you on for the new year to do a podcast for the book launch as well.
Right on.
Yeah. Thank you so much for being here. And yeah, thank you for the conversation.
Thank you.